It doesn't matter what show I'm doing. It doesn't matter whose show I'm producing and listening to. Whatever is happening, I'm always stunned by how fast the time goes by. And this has been an incredibly fast show. So
well, there's just so much going on. You're so welcome. There's never anything to run out of these days. We live in a multi-ring circus,
True
apparently.
That.
And hard to say where it's all leading, but let's hope euphoria and world peace. That's where
those are
my
great
focus
things.
Is. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. And pursuant to that, we're getting back to helping others and this idea of staying as positive as possible and resisting the temptation to dwell in very negative spaces and complain a lot. Instead, consider how could you contribute something that would help others? And in so doing, you will help yourself. It's inevitable. It's
That's absolute truth.
Cosmic law.
I agree with that 100% because I've experienced it.
And what's going on with all the psychic revelations that are going, not only psychic channeling, but what have you heard about Insider Space Program, Super Soldier disclosure going on? There seems to be a lot of activity of that, and how that relates to the U.S. Space Force, proposed new sixth branch of the military.
Proposed, air quotes, new, right? I was fortunate enough to hear Corey Goode speak at Contact in the Desert last year. I was not sure what I thought of his lecture, of his sharing of his experience, because it just seemed so bizarre. I mean, how could someone be raised and living and working off planet when we haven't even been back to the moon to pick up our trash? You know? So,
well, the whole idea of this 20-year and back program, right?
Yeah.
That you're plucked off the street or whatever your everyday life context is. You're plucked out of your everyday life, whisked off for a 20-year contract and back, and they put you back 15 minutes later in real time or some such thing. How can you prove or disprove that, for one thing? How do we know Corey Goode is telling the truth? He seems compelling. I've listened to many interviews of his and others too. They all seem very genuine.
Yes.
Some were conscripted. Some had family ties, but others I've heard giving video testimony claimed to have been enslaved.
Yes.
One guy was smarmy to a son of an Illuminati person and was basically punished by being enslaved for a 20 and back. So he was punished in his mind. He lived this 20 years, but on Earth where it's almost, this sort of thing is almost incomprehensible.
It is incomprehensible. But there's several people who have shared very similar experiences. I found it interesting that they came out when we were being told that the president was interested in a space force. Or the people that I saw had come out recently in that time frame. So I started researching it a little bit, and it's not a new thing. I'm not sure, to be honest, what I think of it. Do I believe that there's time travel possible, and if these people are going into space, then they're using wormhole technology that we're not being made aware of? I think it exists. I know that when I was at Alien Con last year, there was discussion with one of the physicists lecture that, Beam Me Up is not far away. They're already moving organisms, living organisms that are still living when they get to the other side. So that's actually in place. And now it's just degrees.
I've seen
until,
some of that reporting too. It's a bit disconcerting, but I suppose a logical progression of how things seem to be going,
yes.
if you know what I mean.
Well, the person that I saw is actually a current employee of NASA.
Uh-huh.
And he is a double physicist, and he's brilliant. And I would have no reason to doubt his statement. In fact, I even asked in another lecture, I said, you still draw a check from the government? And they let you be here? So are you disclosure or disinformation? Right?
Right.
Because it's
right.
either or. There's not a lot of middle ground there.
And again, it's hard to tell.
It is hard to tell.
The credibility factor. We know that NASA has misrepresented some information, and we know that about the CIA. We know it about other branches of the federal government. We know about the military. So when Trump announces a space force as a sixth branch, a lot of people believe it has a lot more to do with China, again, and Russia putting
their
up
technology
platforms,
is
weapons platforms in space, and that we need a space force to defend or play offense, whatever. Right. I mean, all of this stuff is so mind-bogglingly, dangerous, and I hate to say comic booky because it's very real life, but
it's kind of like Marvel.
It does seem that way to me. And yet I understand the nuclear energy industry is a very real industry. Yes. Nuclear power plants are a very real phenomenon. Nuclear weapons installations are a very real phenomenon. And somebody recently really was shot down for entering Area 51 during the government shutdown.
Yes.
When federal workforce called in sick as they moonlighted to get income to pay their bills.
Yes.
When they weren't receiving paychecks. So there's a lot going on, Well, Secure Team ran some video on an astronaut at the International Space Station outside doing some repair on a camera. It looked like maintenance on a camera, adjusting a lens perhaps. And the case was made that the astronaut noticed UFOs flying around and put a gloved hand in the way to block the screen, and then took his hand away, and there were other UFOs, and so tilted the camera away from that field of blank space because it wasn't blank space. Now, again, you were saying Photoshop, it can all be faked, but there's a lot of this stuff going on, and apparently a lot of people have a lot of time on their hands. What can I say?
Well, I leave the NASA channel on sometimes just because I like it. I like to see the constellation. I like to see what's out there. And I have been watching when they cut to black. And there was a reason for it. So I do know that there's things that they get caught out with. It doesn't happen very often, at least not when I'm watching it. Apparently, some people have nothing but time to watch it and catch every anomaly and clip it and share it. But I don't.
Right.
I just find it interesting. It's almost...
Oh, me too.
Like with SETI. People that would just sit there and listen to their computer as they were... I think it can become mesmerizing. I wish SETI had more publicized success. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
How do you define success for SETI?
I define success for SETI as kind of getting the wow signal on a regular basis. I have spoken with Seth Shostak, who is the director of SETI. And he's like, we've never gotten anything. I'm like, there is no way. I know people all over the globe whose computers have been utilized in that program for decades. There's no way you've gotten nothing. And he was very adamant that, there's never been any proof of evidence that he would buy And I was like, but you're a self-confirmed skeptic. You're going to take the Holy Grail to teach that to you, to show that to you. And he's like, you're right, I am. So, but he is a self-confirmed skeptic. He did put this program in place because he wants to know. He's brilliant. And I'm very fortunate to have had a chance to talk to him, just, general conversation as we strolled from place to place. But he's somebody that I really admire a lot simply because he's tenacious. But that's enough about that. We need to talk about you because we've only got about 4.5 minutes.
Well, thank you kindly. I appreciate that.
What's your
I'm just
opinion
having
about
a
all
ball,
these things?
living the dream.
I know, right? Aren't we fortunate souls?
We are. And this is such an interesting time to be alive. Love it or hate it, and probably there's some of each. I'm certainly trying to find the love in everything possible. But a light worker doesn't always operate entirely out of love. Certainly it's underlying and in the backs of our minds, but my interpretation of light work does not mean turning the other cheek until you run out of cheeks. I will defend my positions as politely as possible and as firmly and sanely as possible. But if a person is irrational and attacking, I will hide, flee, or fight. And fighting is my last option. I'm not a fighting kind of person. But if you back me in a corner and it's me or you, I hope it's me. And I think that may be part of our universal love lesson, is that, like it or not, we inhabit physical bodies. And everything's fine as long as beings love each other and act lovingly to each other. But once you get somebody acting in an unloving, selfish, or evil way, all of a sudden the seeds are sown for other people to imitate that. In other words, you're driving along in traffic, everything's fine, everybody's mellow and groovy, and all of a sudden somebody speeds up, cuts into traffic, and cuts over 3 lanes and takes an exit, and it's burning rubber. They get up to that traffic light and they muscle people out of the way, and they're creating havoc. And all of a sudden, other people are acting more aggressively and less kind with each other in traffic. It happens all the time.
It does.
Passive aggression. I include myself in the group of people who occasionally has trouble controlling passive aggression. Until we can raise consciousness to get over that sort of, in other words, it's easy to ohm when you're in an ohm circle full of other people ohming. But when you're by yourself and things are not so great and groovy, if you can ohm then, you are on your way to mastery, in my opinion.
Yes.
And that's where I'm trying to lead myself in the rest of this incarnation, is dwelling on that mastery space as much as possible, even as I get everyday things done, like publishing a book, running a website, writing 2,000 words a day, which I do for various publications, health as well as paranormal, and now survival preparedness, which I love.
That's a great topic.
I wrote one on surviving being trapped in a car.
Ooh.
And it's a thing. There was actually a guy up north, I want to say in Ohio, who, bless his heart, his car locked himself in. It was electronic, and he had a key fob malfunction. And somehow he had the spare batteries with him, and he got it changed out, but it still didn't operate. And he was locked in his car for something like 14 hours until his neighbor came over with a flashlight. This guy was a firefighter, and got the guy out of his car. The guy thought he was going to die.
That's
inside
horrid.
his car. I know. But that's what survival preparedness is all about, exploring the edges of our comfort zones and preparing for them.
That's almost...
That guy should have had granola bars and water and tanks of oxygen in his car.
Blankets. No, I'm ridiculous. You should have things like that where you can access them.
Yeah.
And not in your trunk all the time.
The actual tool to have is a hammer with a pointed end, not a blunt end.
Well, they make those tools.
Like a pickaxe. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but they make the tools for that, just for that. And,
exactly.
I just don't understand why